Okay, so fair warning on this one. This is a review and a discussion and a long play all wrapped up into one big ball of video. If you've not played Another World and you think you're probably going to end up playing it at some point, I would suggest taking this Too Long Didn't Watch version and then leaving straight away, because this is going to spoil pretty much everything. So this is the Too Long Didn't Watch version. This is one of my favourite games. It is full of flaws. It's wildly infuriating. It is a game built on trial and error, but it does create a beautifully realised world, and I can forgive it for all of its flaws. But you haven't played it yet, so go and do that and then come back and then we'll fight about it or something. Okay? Sorted. Everyone else, let's strap in. Another World was originally developed by Eric Chahi, I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, for the Amiga and Atari ST, and it's the Amiga version that we're going to be looking at today. In North America, the game was also known as Out of This World, and that title got transported back to Europe in later ports of the game, specifically on the SNES, which is where I first played this. I have no idea why the name was changed, but we'll stick with the original title from now on, mainly because it's just a better title. Back in 1991, everyone seemed to be punching for that golden goose of cinematic graphical finesse. This, for a lot of people, was the first time anything even got close. And for those who played it, this introduction sequence is absolutely seared into their minds. To this day, there is something absolutely spectacular about this sequence. Another World has a very specific method of storytelling. Show, don't tell. Even the manual itself is very slim on details, a single diary entry from our lead character, Lester. This diary entry is taken, strangely enough, from the midpoint of the game, so I'll cover that when we get to it. Essentially, what we can determine from this intro sequence is that Lester drives a very nice car. He seems to be running a solo experiment on the Large Hadron Collider, and as is usually the case with any "oh no, it's gone wrong" science experiment, lightning has caused a malfunction that has jettisoned Lester, his chair, and a large hunk of concrete right out of the lab. At the time, this minimalist pseudo 3D style was the absolute cream of the crop, and its almost paint-like veneer carries the game really well. Each shot is framed so beautifully it could easily make for a desktop wallpaper, apart from maybe this one where Lester looks like a ginger albino monkey. But aside from that, the game's minimalism has a sense of style to it that combats the age of the technology involved. Once the intro's over and done with, the game immediately begins. A flash of light and Lester, his desk, and a chunk of concrete places itself squarely in the middle of a body of water. And here you'll learn fast that if your reactions aren't swift, death certainly is. There are a multitude of ways to die in another world, and the game is built around a requirement to perform very specific actions at very specific times during very specific events. Lester is fragile. He is not a superhero. He is a normal ginger albino humanoid who enjoys cans of Coke and performing experiments on his own late at night. To be transported to an entirely new world is a bit of a life-threatening event. Outside the water pool, we get our first glimpse of this entirely new world. An alien landscape, a new moon, a giant beast that looks hungry. Lester certainly didn't make it easy on himself. At this point in the game, Lester is entirely unarmed, and the only defense mechanism he has at his disposal is a kick. This is handy because you'll need to kick the ever-living shit out of some grotesque space leeches in the next few screens. Screw that up even a little bit, and this happens. Grim. Beautifully animated, but grim. As you make your way across these screens, you may or may not notice some delightful incidental detail, and it's something the game does a lot in the foreground and background of any given screen. Notice that the beast from the first screen is traversing the landscape alongside you, hinting that he is, in fact, trying to cut you off. There's also this beetle, which has absolutely no purpose whatsoever, but he will continue his slow, effortful journey as you make your way through these screens, and it breathes life into the world. This beetle had to be drawn, animated, programmed, and committed to memory, and all for the sake of simply setting the scene. Once Lester has finished kicking leeches to death, he's finally confronted by the beast, and it quickly becomes clear why killing all those leeches is a very good idea. It is time to run. Run for your life. Because if you hesitate for a second here, hi Beetle, the beast will have your face off quicker than Nicolas Cage. A death-defying leap, a swing back to solid ground, and it's time to run back the other way. And just as the beast appears to be gaining ground once more, Lester bumps into two kindly saviours. It appears Lester is not the only intelligent life on this planet, but these guys don't take too kindly to waving. For all Lester knows, to be fair, this could be the hand sign equivalent to Holocaust denial to these guys. Either way, he takes a shot to the chest and it's lights out. Lester awakes in a cage, and we're about to meet my favourite NPC of the entire game. Nope, not this guy. But this guy is pretty useful, even if he is the last thing you'd want to wake up to in a morning. That's a hangover you won't get over too fast. It turns out that this handsome chap is your cellmate, and you're currently suspended over a pit in some sort of mine. He isn't given a specific name in the game, but he's often referred to as Buddy by fans, and I'm not about to change that. He is invaluable, and you'll grow to love his big square face by the time this is all over. Firstly, though, we need to escape, and swinging the cage from left to right is our only option. It's in doing this that we get to see my favourite NPC of the entire game. I love this guy. Look how quickly he nips out from behind the wall. He's like a cartoon character. This entire scene, in fact, is full of incidental details that truly make this game more than the sum of its parts. Firstly, we see the main antagonist here taking off his cloak and putting it into a side compartment. We can safely assume that this is the twat who shot us in the stomach. These guys working in the background show us that we're in some sort of forced labour mining colony, and Buddy and me are the next two unwilling bootlickers. Our antagonist gets pissy at our heroic cage swinging and marches over to us, barking orders and, eventually, shooting a warning shot, which makes this guy appear. When the cage comes crashing down, killing our guard, the best NPC ever runs off to tell everyone, and the miners, for the first time, down tools and watch from afar. I've gone into a lot of detail here, but this is why I love the game as much as I do. Not a word has been spoken, yet the detail provided by each screen, in the scenery, the animation, the actions of the characters, they all provide a splash of story that you can piece together yourself. The game forms a narrative without ever giving you a direct detail, and it does it expertly. It's escape time. Lester grabs the guard's gun and Buddy just charges off like a lunatic. He soon comes running back when the action heats up though. We quickly learn that our gun has a few features built in. A single press fires a laser, holding the fire button for a while creates a shield, and holding it for a super long time powers up a mighty blast. That mighty blast also takes up a chunk of ammo, so let's not do that again. Once Buddy has unlocked the door, we head to the lift. First stop, the top floor, where we find this absolutely gorgeous animated sequence that can easily be missed if you head down first. A look from the barred windows shows us an oppressive landscape, locked in the claw-like grip of the city. We have no idea where to go, no idea what to do, but this single image gives the game an incredible sense of scale. Truth be told, the game can be completed in roughly 30 minutes, and this image is never really touched on again, but it places Lester in the middle of everything. It shows us how small he truly is in the face of not just this city, but this entire planet, the entire universe. For me, this single scene sums up the game's ability to paint the image of a game much bigger than what it showcases. Back down to the bottom floor, I jumped the gun a little here. I was convinced there was an enemy on the other screen, and I'm pretty sure in the SNES version there is a guy on that screen, but he wasn't there in the Amiga version. We got what we came for though. An electrical panel on the far wall is shot, which damages the door on the floor above. This stops the guy from shooting us, and we can continue onwards. A locked door awaits with an enemy on the other side. My gun is out of ammo, we're screwed. Or we would be if not for Buddy, who finds a panel in the floor that I can slip through. I'm not entirely sure what happened to the animation here. Again, maybe this was just a SNES thing, but the guard walks in and Buddy is supposed to fight the guy, but the guard just sort of vanishes. Maybe Lester and Buddy were having some sort of shared hallucination. I'm not sure, who knows. It's time to head down, and this section never fails to make me feel claustrophobic. Lester has to roll around in these vents until he finds a route that leads out. I couldn't remember the correct route, so of course I instantly killed myself. Once Lester gets through all that, we find a mysterious glowing room. This recharges Lester's gun, which is bloody lucky, as we'll be needing that an awful lot. Lester finds that the bridge to the next area is out, and a precarious leap only gets him so far. Blasting a hole in the wall gets us inside a cave network, and whoo! If you ever wanted to feel frustrated at a game, this is the place to come. Here is where the game manual's diary entry comes into play. These are the only words we actually see from Lester's own dialogue. Lester Knight Chaikin. I'm taking advantage of this short period of rest to record some useful information in the notebook which has survived my recent adventures. I am now separated from my companion in the escape, without whom I could certainly not have got away. I hope I will manage to find him, and above all, I hope he is not dead, for I owe him my life. But for the time being, my main objective is to get out of this maze of underground galleries, where I am wandering with no indication of the passage of time. On top of that, I constantly encounter streams that threaten to flood these galleries at any time. Concerning the weapon I have found, I have now understood the way it works. Pressing the trigger releases a single shot. Press it longer and an energy ball appears. If you release the trigger at this moment, a field of force is created. If you hold the trigger down, the ball gets bigger and becomes devastating in its effect, yet greedy in energy. The weapon light seems to be a charge indicator. I'm honestly not sure how his notebook survived being dumped in a cavern full of water at the start of the game, but hey ho. Okay, so first things first, a little explanation as to what's going on in this section. Blasting through this wall and heading out of the cave system, we come to a staircase in both directions. We meet an impasse. A waterfall is animated so well it took me back for a couple of seconds. It's a simple method of displacing the background, but it's also something I can't remember seeing in any other game prior to this, and very few thereafter. Certainly not within the same technological realms. Anyway, that's enough about water, sort of. We need to find a way to get rid of this beautifully animated H2O altogether, and by crikey, this is a tough one. In my younger days, I think I gave up on this area for a solid year before I went back to it and finally figured it out. The sequence is now entirely engraved in my memory, and it's still as hard as balls. Everything about this requires precise timing and positioning, and it's infuriating. There are two paths to take, and it's the lower path that you need to explore first. It's this area that will, without a doubt, cause your total number of deaths to quadruple at the very least. Jump the spikes, avoid the falling rocks, wait for these rocks to align before you run past, avoid this last rock, jump past the tentacles, make your way past those tentacles and weird floor mouth things, do the same again on the next screen, jump the gap, jump the next floor mouth, and you're halfway there. Easy, right? Well... Yeah, this takes a bit of practice to get right, and what was the purpose of this journey? To blow up a wall. A wall which you won't know you need to blow up until later, where the game will absolutely screw you over if you haven't done this. Personally, I find this to be the biggest design flaw for a puzzle in the whole game. This one wall. You'll see later on why this wall is such an integral thing to get right, but for now, make sure to note it down as a bad mark against the game. Bad game. Naughty game. Right, it's time to head back. So, basically, do all the stuff that you did on the way here, but in reverse, up until you get to this point. You'll notice this bird, dragon, pterodactyl beast hanging from the ceiling. You'll need to fire a warning shot at this guy to make him fly, at which point he'll switch to the other screen. He'll eventually fly up into the tentacles, which gives you space to jump past. We can then shoot out the left-hand side of the big anvil-shaped rock to get upstairs. Now, for the culmination of all of this cave dwelling, it's time to blast out a very precariously placed rock structure in order to cause a flood, and run like hell while we're at it. At the end, we get pushed to the surface by this very well-placed platform, and Lester walks away like he's the coolest goddamn human on the planet. Well, I guess he technically is. This has all resulted in the drying up of the previously discussed waterfall areas, so Lester can finally get into the next section. It's here that we get to see our new best friend once again. He appears to be trapped in a crawl space. We'll need to help him out a bit later. Firstly, we need to take out this hooded fella, which is simply a case of pressing the fire button before he can react, and then head along the top gallery until we meet this dude. This is where some more incidental detail starts to come into play, and it's not immediately noticeable unless you've played the game 1,000 times like I have. The costumes that the antagonists wear are clearly dictating the rank of each enemy. This guy here, for example, with his spiky hair piece, is a grenadier. In this version of the game, which I'll discuss later, he's the only one, but it's clear that there are hierarchies amongst the aliens on this planet, and it's never discussed. Probably not even noticed by the vast majority of players. It's a detail that doesn't need to be absorbed, but it's there regardless. Anyway, for a grenadier, he's pretty shit at his job. Make him throw one of his bouncing grenades at you, then step away from the automatic door. It'll bounce right back and kill him. One room over is our beloved gun charging station, and further right still we've come across this curious looking room. Here we see 3 globes hanging from a domed roof and a curiously placed slit from which we can shoot. You'll also notice a reflection of a grunt walking backwards and forwards underneath. Wait for him to stop directly beneath the left-hand globe, then shoot. We'll find this guy later on, dead as a doornail. Sorry fella, had to be done. Back downstairs, there's a few things we need to clear up. Firstly, we can lure out a guard by shooting. He'll begin to blast back, so make sure to pop a shield up to protect yourself. When you try to head back, another guard will knock you out. It'll look like Lester is done for initially, but a swift kick to the balls will free him, at which point you can race for your gun and take him out. If you don't start a fight with the other guy first, you're liable to get caught in a fight from both sides of the screen, and that's just a bloody nightmare to deal with. Now, funnily enough, on the next screen over, that exact thing is supposed to happen. As you reach the centre of the screen, 2 shields form on each side, and laser blasts come in. You're supposed to form a shield on both sides of yourself and blast your way out, but I panicked and ran for it. As I reached the next screen, I was shot, but the game saved before I died, so I just sort of bypassed that entire fight. On heading back, those guys were gone, so there's an accidental tip for you. When the going gets tough, just run away. Before we continue, we have one last thing to do. Remember how Buddy was trapped in that tunnel earlier on? We need to release him. A quick jaunt to our left and we come across a chandelier within shot range. Shoot this out and Buddy can crawl through the tunnel. I'm not quite sure how this works, but I've learnt never to question the power of chandeliers. Okay, so back where we were. Remember earlier how I shot out that wall? The one that we had no idea we would need to shoot out? This is the result. This body of water would not be here if we hadn't taken out that wall first. There would be a pit. A game-ending pit. It's not an elegant solution, but you'd effectively need to restart back before the caves in order to do things properly. Down underneath the water, we need to swim our way through these horrific caverns we thought were long behind us and make our way out to this electrical wire. This will stop us from immediately dying when we drop down into the next room we're heading to, as it shorts out the doors. Here's the dude we killed with the green globe, by the way. Sorry, fella. And now, into the pit. If we hadn't shorted out that electrical wire, we'd be dead at this point. The doors on the left side would open up and a barrage of fire would come through. Shorting the doors gives us just enough time to blast the door to our right and absolutely leg it. As we race through the corridors, gun blasts chasing at our heels, we see our friend Buddy crawling through the tunnels above us. It's lucky we rescued him earlier because he's about to rescue us. A dead end meets us and the aliens are hot on our tail. Just as it looks like all hope is lost, Buddy kicks out the panel above our heads and extends a helping hand. We've escaped at last. And now, here's a curious thing. This screen is one I recognise, but not from this point in the game. It appears that the original Amiga release of Another World was shorter than later ports of the game. Eric Chahi seemed to take on board the main criticism of the game being too short to heart and produce an entire extra section. There is, however, a hacked version of the Amiga game in circulation which reinstates this extra level, and it's one that's well worth playing through. It does feature one of the most infuriating puzzles, one that involves grenades and a floor. If you've played it, I'm sure you'll know what I'm talking about. But the extended area is more than worth seeking out. For that reason alone, if you can get your hands on the extended edition, or in fact, any other version of Another World outside the Amiga and our Atari ST originals, I'd recommend those over this, just to ensure you get the complete vision. Right, moving on. Lester and Buddy climb into this alien spaceship, but it quickly becomes apparent that Buddy doesn't know how to drive manual, and the ship just sort of farts itself out into this gladiatorial arena. It's up to Lester to get us out of this one, and by randomly jamming his hand against buttons, he manages to eject the 2 of them to safety. Sort of. Buddy has gone elsewhere, but Lester ends up in this sexy alien sauna. The ladies aren't too pleased and run off screaming, which causes the guards to immediately start blasting. If you don't begin running straight away, Lester will just die. Once you get to the second screen, however, they all start shooting like stormtroopers. There's a gun battle that you'll need to get through before you can head onwards, but we need to find Buddy if we're going to get out of here alive. Then suddenly, we don't need another hero. As quickly as you're reunited, you're split up again. Lester falls down and is rescued by some sort of Terminator Buddy? Look, I don't want to seem racist, but you'll be forgiven for thinking that this is Buddy. They look almost identical apart from his giant red eye. Anyway, unlike Buddy, this guy wants you dead. He serves you a wall sandwich and then kicks you off into the other screen. It looks like we're screwed. But suddenly... we don't need another hero. What the hell sort of fight is this? Come on, guys, put some willy into it. Lester slowly crawls over to some levers. The evil Buddy beats good Buddy, who manages to cling to the ledge for dear life. Lester pulls some switches, zaps evil Buddy, crawls into the light, gets beamed up to a ceiling where there's a dragon, and then they all fly away and live happily ever after. Okay, look, I'll be the first to admit the ending's a bit out of nowhere, but I also kind of like it. It gives us this bleak realization that Lester may have won this battle, but his final story hasn't finished yet. He is not getting out of this place. Certainly not in this game, at least. This is one of my favourite games of all time. I would say I replay this at least once every 3 years or so. I do that for a few reasons. It's incredibly short, the atmosphere is penetrable with a knife, the graphics have this weird, archaic charm to them, it features this guy, and I believe it's a masterpiece in short-form cinematics in gaming. It's a form of storytelling that went on to make games like Ico, Shadow of the Colossus, even Dark Souls, and the games that come out after that. The environment paints the history of the world. Your interpretation of that experience is what makes the story. You're seeing the world through Lester's eyes, even though you're playing the game in third person. You understand this world just as much as he does. That is to say, neither of you understand this world. Not until you begin to learn how it works. Take in the details and then understand. It is a very heavily flawed game. And I'll freely admit that. It can be incredibly difficult. It relies on constant trial and error. Some of the puzzles can be wildly incomprehensible. And you will die. A lot. But through all of this, the game's world still drags me back in. And it's in the realization that these fragmented experiences and these annoyances, they are all part of the game design. Lester is a fragile, out-of-place human in a cold, dark, hostile alien world. So are you. It is truly a masterpiece of design. The end.